I have a piece of art in my home that I hold very dear to me. It may have been the first time that I looked at something and just felt utterly captivated at a first glance. And when I show the piece to you, you may find yourself snickering or thinking I'm being a troll or that this is all just some big joke, and I would understand why you would think that. But please just hear me out, and I want to start by explaining how I found myself possessing this unique piece of art. I was at a farmer's market in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and all my friends had gone their separate ways to different booths at the farmer's market. So I was looking at the art and photography booths. I had a few pieces in my home that I would consider art. They were made by people close to me, and a few things that were just kind of largely commercially produced, but nothing too flashy. So I found myself sampling these different booths, finding some unique artists that art people probably hadn't seen before. Definitely I hadn't seen before. And I set aside some pieces that I tend to gravitate towards, things like constellations, oceanscapes, or pretty women, or some combination of those three things. I was flipping through one booth pretty quickly because I had already set aside some pieces that I was going to buy, but I just wanted to make sure that I didn't leave anything behind. So I'm going through these pictures and just 1, 2, 10 pass me by in a matter of seconds, and I just look at them, and it's almost like I'm swiping on Tinder. I give them a second and I say no, no, no. And then I came across the subject of today's video. There was just something so absurd about it. There was a whole theme to this booth. It was just animals and stars and really cool aesthetically pleasing stuff, kind of like my tapestry behind me. But then there was just this toast. And I laughed myself, and then I kept flipping, and then I had to go back to it. What was that doing here? And then I flipped back to it, and I stared at it for a little while, and I just found myself getting sucked into it. I was appreciating it in a way that just felt like it was encapsulating the entire moment. It was just crazy that I had found it in that booth at that time, at that place. I had already set aside a piece that I wanted to buy, but I was in a bit of a hurry and a little tight on funds, so I set aside the piece that I had already chosen and decided to go with my gut and chose today's piece. And that was a knee-jerk decision that I would never once come to regret. I want you to look at this picture, maybe even pause the video to take it all in. If I were to ask you to describe it with one word, I'm sure toast would be the first one to come to most of your minds. Think about how you feel about it, then hear me out. Before I delve into the ins and outs of what I think this photo means, or could be trying to state, I would like to point to some subtle parts of it that may escape you at a first glance. I've had the photo on the screen for a while now. Ask yourself how many of these things you noticed. The photo is washed in a palette of dull grays and blues caused by the marble countertop and wallpaper. The toaster emits a warm glow which draws the eyes to the focal point of the piece, the superheated filaments of the toaster. The vivid oranges and reds combine to illustrate the crucible through which the heroes of our piece ascend, the two pieces of toast, both wheat warriors, emerging victoriously from their heated trial, forever changed. Now consider the height of the bread. It's been jettisoned from the slot in the toaster with the force of a pilot pulling the ejector seat cord. As anyone who has ever made toast can tell you, it rarely shoots out of the toaster with such gusto. This is an almost cartoonish depiction of what one imagines the toast-making process. You can envision some character grabbing this toast mid-air and slapping a thick piece of butter on it before running off to catch the bus. That is not to say that toast never ejects with this force, but the artist's intent was clearly to capture the extravagant climax of the bread crispening process. Sometimes I find myself imagining how the artist created this scene. Maybe with strings? Perhaps he really did get a springy toaster and waited patiently for the cooked bread to emerge from the heat before capturing dozens of photos all at once, solidifying the fleeting moment of food's flight. Upon another glance at the leftmost toast, if you can bring yourself to look away from the majesty of it forever being suspended mid-expulsion, you'll find the suggestion of an outlet. It would have to be a thin outlet to remain hidden behind the toast's narrow side. This got my mind wondering on the power source for the toaster. Where's the cord? Is it too hiding behind the thin crust, pointing straight down so as to be perfectly hidden by this one moment of ascension? I find this scenario difficult to believe, more difficult than the previous scene of the photographer waiting just to capture the perfect moment of the bread's ejection. I find myself struggling with the idea that a scene like this exists, and evidence against this piece's legitimacy seems to be piling up. The questions posed by analyzing the structure of this piece led me to ask one other question. Is this piece caught in real time, or is it all fake, photoshopped and edited to make a scene impossible to capture? What do you think? I can't help but compare my feelings about the legitimacy of this piece to the 2012 movie Life of Pi. I know it was based off of a novel, but I never bothered to read the book, and I hear the movie did a pretty decent job, so spoilers for the movie and possibly the novel as well. The movie is the story of a man named Pi, recounting his life from boyhood. He tells the tale to an author with the tantalizing claim that the story could make him believe in God. Pi is raised with a thirst for the spiritual and religious side of life. He finds himself lost at sea with several animals that begin to die in various ways until it's just him, alone, with a large Bengal tiger. He manages to live alone with this tiger for months, and its presence pushes him to survive. In this story, Pi learns life lessons by exploring larger-than-life locations and witnessing seemingly impossible things. Pi is saved by the end of this story, and he recounts his tale to insurance adjusters tasked with finding out what happened to the ship. The insurance adjusters are none too pleased with Pi's account of things, and they don't believe his grandiose tale. Pi then begrudgingly offers them an alternative story where he as a young boy is forced to watch his mother killed by a depraved man. Pi then goes on to kill the man and then survive on his own, alone and stranded until he floats to shore. Each of the animals in the first story have a human equivalent in this version. It's implied that not even Pi believes this story, and that he only told the men what he thought they wanted to hear, just so that they would leave. The movie returns to Pi, present day, regaling the author with his story. Pi asks which story the author would choose to believe. The author tearily says he would choose the story with the tiger, marking his choice not only to believe in God, but to deny the urge to choose pessimism for the sake of maintaining a narrative. The ending is purposefully kept ambiguous to give the viewer the same choice as the author. When questioning the validity of this piece, I found that this story came to mind. What would I choose? Clearly, it would be easiest to say that Photoshop and the work of a professional food stylist created the work before me. I could leave it at that and never bother with this photo again, because after all, the outlet really does seem to be removed and no one would fault me for choosing this belief. But I do find myself wanting this piece to be real, though. The urge propelled me towards a new view of it. Maybe it doesn't need to be physically real in the sake that the toast really did propel itself beyond normal expectations, so just as to obstruct the outlet plug and cord right when the photographer snapped the perfect picture at the perfect angle, maybe the picture represented something more than the event of bread's final transition to toast. If this had been the most commonplace discharge marking the completion of cooked toast, it wouldn't have the same spectacle presented. But would that motion be enough to convey the finality that this piece does? You've stuck with me for this long, so I would like for you to ask yourself again. If I were to ask you to summarize this picture with one word, would you still just say toast? Maybe if I changed the question and asked you to come up with some descriptors for this piece, maybe you would say warm, comforting, homey. Maybe on a surface level these descriptors do the piece justice, but it's here where I feel my mind melt into the nirvana associated with high art. It's the kind of art you can just get lost in. And I do. I have this picture hanging in my home, and I stare at it for a long time, pretty frequently. If the photographer really did take the time to stage this piece, why? What were they going for? If they were trying to convey a cozy kitchen, the palette and almost aggressive motion of the toast do not convey this well. As banal as this setting seems, this is an action shot. What if I told you that in this piece, I see triumph? The ever-spinning wheel of change, the climactic victory over the trials of life, the very idea that one can escape one's present situation and become something more. I mentioned it before, but I don't think it's a stretch to imagine the toaster as a sort of crucible, the vector through which the flaccid pale bread becomes harder and battle-scarred. If this seems like a stretch, watch what happens when I use AI to shift the toast to burned. If the original piece had any ambiguity as to what it was trying to present, this altered image is much clearer by comparison. This image becomes a story of defeat. A negligent homeowner who had too much going on to pay attention to the very substance that will continue their existence. If this image were hanging in a kitchen, it would foster an air of chaos to the room that would unnerve anyone hoping to enjoy a good meal here. Yet, we don't have burnt toast. We have thoroughly golden brown toast and a clean countertop. Because of this choice to include perfectly cooked toast, we can attribute a level of optimism to the creator, or at least the piece. I would like to take an aside for a moment and describe to you what I think the opposite kind of piece would look like. What is a piece that I would consider pessimistic? I wouldn't choose something so black and white as a war scene or Hieronymus Bosch's hellscapes. As horrendous as these settings are, they require a level of artistic mastery that leaves enough room for interpretation. An artist spent decades honing their craft and chose to paint scenes that are capable of evoking fear in us. Maybe these are warnings. You can see how even a sight as gruesome as this one can be interpreted as a good intention behind it. There are so many details and moments captured by this Wimmel builder that you can build your own stories. No, a pessimistic painting this piece does not make. To give an example of a pessimistic piece, I have to tell another story. My friends and I set aside an entire day to visit the Frist Art Museum in Nashville, Tennessee. As far as the art exhibits go, there was little that held our attention or even got the brain moving. We didn't really start enjoying ourselves until we got to the second floor, which showcased medieval knight artifacts and artistry. You could see effort in that work. Artifacts that had rightfully so outlived their creators and still held and preserved beauty. Not a single piece on the first floor compared to the level of beauty and intricacy that any given curious on the second floor had. The worst offender for this lack of creativity and passion greeted you right as you walked in. It set the tone for the rest of the pieces in the same way that being slapped right as you enter a party would have. The art piece in question, and I do say that somewhat sarcastically, was titled Yellow Canvas. Now, unlike the subject of our video, that is truly all you would need to know everything about the piece. It was a medium-sized canvas. It was painted a single shade of yellow. There were no gradients to get lost in. There was no focal point. It was a blank canvas, and the museum, in my opinion, would have been better served to put an open frame on the wall because at least the wall had some texture to it. This is what I mean by a pessimistic piece. The only, and I do mean only good thing I can say about it is that the toddler who painted it did a decent job at maintaining an even coat of paint across the canvas. Even in this blank expression of art, which I somewhat begrudgingly call it so, you can see a reflection of the artist. The canvas is blank and smooth and yellow, the color of cowardice. One can imagine the creator of this piece saying the horrendous phrase that all tacky artists will substitute with an original thought of their own. The point of art is to get you talking about it. At least it got you talking. While I could spend an entire other video dissecting the sheer level of nihilism baked into that dogma, I'll leave it at this. I don't believe for 1 second that that painting was made to get people talking. I believe that piece was made to be put into a museum. And from there, the pretentious will pretend to see some deeper meaning, and the lay person will recognize it as trash. And the squabbling between the two of them will serve well enough to keep the piece relevant and keep bodies flowing in and out and justify leaving it on the wall. It's empty arguments, empty meaning, empty art. That is pessimism given form. I acknowledge that I myself may seem guilty of being pretentious while attempting to explain that this picture of toast is hiding some meaning behind it. To absolve me of any self-importance, I would like to confess I am pretty stupid. I couldn't spell pretentious, and I tend to let the spell check do most of the work for me. I don't want to convince you that this piece is a testament to the indomitable spirit of man, but I do want you to know that I feel this way about it. It's special to me, and I want you to know why I feel that way. As outlandish as this seems, what could one gain by considering this to be an optimistic scene? I believe you flex a muscle in your brain that trains you to glance at the world around and find more than could be noticed at a first look. It's the brain's job to simplify the environment into manageable chunks. This is evolutionarily beneficial and is most prevalent in the fight-or-flight sympathetic response. In this state, your brain narrows between what will kill you and what will save you. You get tunnel vision. Conversely, the parasympathetic response is the result of the restful side of the brain. In this state, you can relax and take in the world with a little more curiosity. Imagine two extreme scenarios of a person making breakfast, one in their sympathetic state and one in their parasympathetic state. Our first person is late for a meeting. In their sympathetic state, they are far more worried about the future than the task in front of them. They rush through the kitchen and slam 2 slices of bread into the toaster. They impatiently wait for their food to cook while tapping their feet and checking their phone. They debate on going hungry in order to save a few precious seconds to the meeting. The toast pops out and the sound of springs releasing juts our character's head up. He grabs the 2 slices of toast without thinking, slaps some butter on each side, and heads out on his way without thinking about the toast ever again. His only goal was to not be hungry for the day. Our second person is not late. They have nowhere to be. They untwist the bag of bread. They feel the soft, spongy texture of the bread on their fingertips. They grab the 2 pieces and slide them into the toaster and press the button down. They feel the resistance of the springs compressing. They look to the toaster and watch its coils slowly begin to heat red hot. They breathe easy and wait patiently, watching the bread slowly change color. The toast pops out as scheduled, and the viewer takes it in. They witness the moment and understand that the entire world does not act on their time. Things will change and become better with a little patience, and there's beauty in that. I'm not saying there's never a time for the sympathetic response. Quite the contrary. That is where growth is forced upon us. This is often for the best as it leads to survival. However, it is a little strange training this part of our brain that relaxes. Many of us struggle with the ability to relax, as paradoxical as that sounds. Whether this is a result of overstimulation, work culture, or internalized trauma, the end result is that most of us could be a lot better at just letting ourselves be. For me, yoga and meditation have worked wonders. For those unfamiliar with the practice of meditation, it essentially boils down to just sitting there and not caring as the world passes you by. You sit. You do nothing. You think nothing. You just breathe. This gives you the ability to remove yourself from your routines and remind yourself that you're not here just to accomplish as many things as quickly as possible before you finally kick the bucket. It's possible to just be. In this state of mind, you're able to take in a lot more. Things stop being pieces of a larger puzzle or a means to an end. They just are, too. In a lot of ways, This piece serves as a reminder of that. It's a tiny moment of nothing in an endless expanse of stimulations. Sometimes it seems like the only part of the world that doesn't seem to constantly stay in motion, and reminds me that I too can stop and allow the world around me to change me, to toast me. I'll be fine, and I'll come out on the other side changed, but bettered. I do believe this piece could be considered a great work of art. If that seems crazy, I would like to point out that it wouldn't be the first time that a toast-related piece of media has found itself enrapturing a larger audience. So, could we just give it the benefit of the doubt? To tie things up, I am a little ashamed to admit I didn't ask the person selling this piece if they were the ones who made it. I never got the artist's name, and all I have is this little smudge of a signature to remember them by. This could be a famous reproduction of another artist, but I have no clue. The most I can make of the squiggly line denoting the creator's name is Joey, and I doubt that's what it says. I would say I think I prefer not knowing. I wouldn't be able to stop myself from asking the creator for the answers to all of the questions I've posed today. While I do follow the death of the author school of analysis, I fear knowing more about the person behind it would reveal too much of the intention behind the process, and thus strip it of any ambiguity that fills a several-minute video essay's worth of pontificating. I much prefer the meaning of the painting to remain unclear and just beyond what I can put into words. I find that the more I grow and flex my appreciation skills, so too do I develop my relationship with this picture. I always seem to find something new to bring out of it, or maybe I'm just bringing it out of myself. Whatever the case, I'm certain that much like pie, I've been given the choice between accepting the mundane and looking past it to find the magic. I've chosen the latter, and much like my purchase of this piece itself, I have never once regretted that decision. Oh, you made it to the end. Thanks for that. I had a lot of fun making this video, and I plan on making more in the future. I might even make another toast video, because there was a lot left unsaid, if you can believe that. So, please just be sure to stick around, and maybe even subscribe if you want to see what I can do in the future. Like I said, I had a lot of fun making this video, but it means the most to me that you stuck around and watched it. You made it to the end. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, and I hope to see you again real soon.